gas here a second. Okay, good morning. Friday, November 1st. Halloween is in the rearview mirror now. Good morning, Eleanor. How are you today?
Good morning. I'm good. Getting a
Good.
lot done.
Yeah, so you briefed me a little bit before we started here, but do you want to, I want to tell you what I did last night, but you tell me
Okay.
first what you've been working on this week. So I know you said you got the advanced report is done, ready?
Mhm.
Oh, do you want to tell me more about that?
Uh, well, I've been working on the Noble Energy Map program,
Mhm.
which is an online program. The free reports are available, and now we have a premium report which covers 5 of the integrated channels in the integrated body map.
Mm.
And then the next report will be all of the integrated channels and maybe some of the gates.
And I remember asking before, but I don't remember the answer. The 5 channels that you provide in the advanced report, is it selected the way you would keynote somebody? Like it, as for me, for example, I asked like when you approached my body graph, you started in the integration, is it the integration or the individual
Oh,
circuits,
yeah,
right?
the 34, 57, 10, 20.
Right. So
I have a priority list
okay.
of usually when I do a reading, I go where the energy of the chart tells me to go. But in thinking about it for a report, I needed to come up with a strategy for what somebody should look at first.
Mhm.
And so I went through and I considered what I would read first. What's the most important thing to look at in the integrated chart?
Mhm.
And generally, um, the central column, which is the satsuma, the core of the self, which Ra described as a penta, right? The
Mhm.
3 central channels. If you have any of those, they're pretty important. So I came up with a list of priorities, and the program reads in sequence what the priorities are.
Mhm. Yeah, I remember you talking about how if you were to approach the penta, like if it were a thing, that you would include the 34, 20, 10, 57 as well, which is, the way I've heard it taught or presented on the BG5 side is, it's only the central column. It just ignores everything else. And
It's
that
such
never that never felt right.
it's such a faulty concept
Yeah.
because we're human beings. And most people, I mean, what Rod didn't know was that most people in their integrated body map have some of those central columns. So if somebody like myself, who in my human design has the 58, 18, 48, 16, so from the root to the splenic center to the throat, and nothing else, uh, you would miss that in my composite, I have many of the central channels.
Mhm.
And I also get the 1222 in the integrated. So which channels are more important? The ones that are part of the human design body graph or the integrated? And
Mhm.
that's a judgment call, and probably for each person.
Yeah.
So, you can't, people are not formulas.
Mhm. No, I agree. And I can remember first seeing that concept and thinking, wow, I bring 4 of 6 channels to every business meeting, if you were to look at it that way. And when I think back to meetings that I've had with other people, they wouldn't be very fun if everybody else wasn't there. Wouldn't be very collaborative if it was like, no, we need to discard this person's energy or their feedback or their experiences.
And Ross said, people who have the head centers should be eliminated from it, or some nonsense like that. And people who have the crown and the ajna can often be channels,
Mhm.
and they can be highly intuitive. So, anyhow, let's not focus too much on that.
No, except it's really interesting. Anyways, interesting just in light of other things. This has been a really weird week for me. I finally watched the Wizard of Oz again last night. So I need to tell you how I got there because you've mentioned it several times, and each time I'm like, oh, that's interesting, but I've seen it. I know how it goes. Um, and
You could probably repeat the whole story and many parts of it by memory.
Yeah, except when I watched it last night, it was like I hadn't seen it before. Like it
Mhm.
wasn't nearly as memorable. Like there were scenes where I was like, oh, I don't remember that at all. Um, so that was interesting all by itself. And now I'm wondering when I last saw it. Um, but yeah, I'm noticing like I get interested in so many things that I almost have to now wait for something to reappear a couple of times. Like if it comes on my radar a few times, it's like I need to pay attention to it because otherwise I'm paying attention to everything everywhere and it's exhausting. So yesterday I wanted to, I was just in a funk. It was just a rough melancholy day. And then everything in the evening got canceled. Like I had plans and I knew where I was going and that just got canceled. And then I was like, well, when he was saying, well, you just play your drums, you'll feel better. But I had to like set part of it up, and it was like dragging bags of concrete over to it. Like it was just, I just didn't want to do it. But I did. I got them set up because it occurred to me that next time now they're set up and I can just sit down and go. And then 10 minutes drumming it was just agonizing. I just wasn't playing well. It just didn't feel right. And then it started to come flow out of me. So towards the end of it, I was like, oh, I'm actually enjoying this. So it was a good reminder that like I just have to slog through the shit and get to the outcome. But what it ended up turning into is I go home and Wendy doesn't have plans, her plans changed. And I was like, well, let's watch The Wizard of Oz. Like for whatever reason, I'm supposed to watch this thing. So so I go and watch it and like I can always place myself like or what I'm seeing in the situation. And so, I started, for whatever reason, I kept thinking about my mental world design, and I have a completely open head najna. While the scarecrow just kept talking about having a brain. And so I was like leaning into that character. And then the Tin Man didn't have a heart, and I have a completely open heart, like nothing to or from. Um, but then I get to the lion, I'm like, I'm not sure where is courage in the body graph? And you and I have talked about courage before. And yeah, it was just such an interesting ride watching the movie with that lens. Um, yeah, and I left. It was a good night. Like I just kind of went to bed and just all sorts of little things there that got my mind racing. I don't know where to go with that other than thank you. It was fun.
Well, the point of looking at some of those things is that the information about the four worlds is all around us.
Mhm.
And the unconscious understands that we have not been taught or not been told how important spirit is in the core of our being, and that we may be missing elements that were not given to us when we were children, but that doesn't mean we don't have them and can't find them. And if we recognize what we're missing, we can find them within ourselves. So what the Jung, Carl Jung, um, talked a lot about the collective unconscious and the process of individuation and the different elements of the personality. And in many ways, the four characters are also representative of type.
Oh,
They're
that's interesting.
a different type in the Jungian system.
Oh, okay, not energy type.
No,
Oh,
but
okay.
Jung was thinking, feeling, intuition, and judgment. So he had four types, which, it's interesting. Ra thought there were four types, but there were really five types. And we're really combining types to be whole. And so we're not really stuck. And when you label somebody, oh, you're this type, or you're an introvert, or you're an extrovert, it's very disempowering to people
Mhm.
because they don't think they can be other. And we can always be other. We have within us everything. So we choose, not always consciously, but we can also take our intelligence, creative intelligence, and apply it to our psyche and be far wiser than we would be without it.
Mhm. Interesting. There's so many things I want to talk. So I'm gonna come back to the lion because while you were explaining that, I remembered. So with the lion, he said that he mistook her wisdom for courage. And it's interesting because that movie was in 1939. And I guess it was made in 1938. And so Wendy was reading all sorts of facts around that movie too, like all sorts of the Munchkins, it fled Germany. The people that played the Munchkins ended up like being able, like they were saved by that movie effectively.
Mm.
Anyways, yeah, it's the whole thing. But the idea of, the messaging at the time was, with this lion was he said you misunderstood courage for wisdom or wisdom for courage. And, like he basically won't fight unless there's a reason to fight. Um, and I think what I took from it as well is like I never been in a fight. I've been challenged all the time. And I now know that there's something in my aura that will want people, like people want to provoke me. Um, and I learned early on how powerful I was, and I think it scared me. So, um, but then I took it
And,
as being like,
and yet your style is provocative.
oh, that's interesting. Well, what do you mean by that?
Well, your mohawk, for one,
Mhm.
the fact that you have purple hair, you're inviting people to look at you and see you as not regular. That takes courage.
Yeah, it's interesting. You chose the word provocative too. That's interesting. Whenever I meet people and they comment on my mohawk, they'll talk about how they had one when they were a teenager and it was
Mm.
a foot tall. And, the amount of effort they had to put into it, the products and stuff. And my answer is always like, well, that sounds like a lot of work. So, and it would just, my hair is already like, by the time you bleach it and dye it, it doesn't grow longer than this. By the time it gets to the end, it's dead. So to
Mm.
me, it's just a very actually simple, fun, practical haircut. I never thought of it as provocative, like in a punk, anarchistic kind of 70s, 80s punk way. I felt it made me more accessible because I find that people tend to not connect with me. And so I feel like it softens me, but I never thought of it as provocative.
Well, when people see you, you're not the ordinary man on the street.
No.
And so, what I mean by provocative is that they see you as different, not ordinary. There's something different about you. So how do they want to treat you? That's their decision.
Mhm.
But some people may be intimidated or project on you something that isn't real, or they may avoid you,
Mhm.
or they may think, oh, this guy is really cool. I want to approach him. But you're making a statement. We
Mhm.
all make statements, right? Um, and your statement is you're not conventional,
Yeah, interesting.
and you're not.
No, and
The
I'm more
30, the
comfortable with it.
3420, you march to your own drum,
Mhm.
literally.
Mhm. Mhm. Cool. Oh, look, the chat's lit up here. One sec. We may already have. Oh, Nami's saying hi. That isn't a question. Um,
May,
where to go from here? Oh, the other thing, so again, I can find parallels in anything, it seems. So I don't know if my mind just needs to be busy, but like they went to the Emerald City. And so I was like, asked Wendy, like, can you just ask ChatGPT, like, where is the Emerald City actually? And it's Seattle. They refer to themselves as the Emerald City, which is like 2 hours from here.
hmm.
That's where I end up going like 3, 4 times a year. So even that is just interesting. All these little, like, I feel like I'm being left breadcrumbs and clues, but I don't know what to do with them. And then I don't know if I'm being silly by letting my mind wander there, or if it's those are clues that are meant for me. Um,
I think that, have you done your goals?
no.
I think you would be very much helped
Mhm.
by having some clear goals because when you have goals, they set a trajectory and a path. Like Dorothy knew she wanted to go home.
Mhm.
The whole story was about how is she going to get home? We all want to go home. And home is that sense of peace internally and um, feeling satisfied that you're on the right path and that there's a faith and a trust in your own process. And it narrows the field. You're very much this way. And
Mhm.
if you came in this way with focus, um, your success rate in everything you do would be magnified.
Yeah, as you say that, the line "home is where the heart is" kept popping in my head. And then I was thinking about the invocation of the unified chakra and how, like, I have done that almost every day, and I did it about an hour ago. Um, and there's a lot to say about that. But it is, you're breathing in through your heart. So it's reminding me to breathe, which all this week, everything is reminding me to breathe, you as well. And I realized that, like, how little I do it. Like, I hold my breath
Mm.
all the time. Like I thought I told you this before, maybe I haven't. Like whenever I would go to see a trainer at the gym, they'd always kind of laugh, like they thought it was funny that I was holding my breath while I'm holding weights above my head, right? That's not good for your back, you know? So, but whenever I concentrate, I hold my breath.
Ah,
And so when I drum, I think I've finally figured out that like if I'm concentrating, like I'm thinking about drumming, I hold my breath, nothing flows. And so it
right.
truly is when I like am able to let go, but I can't at times, or at least I really struggle finding that place.
Sean, what do you know about breath?
It's important.
What is it?
Air, oxygen, uh, space, time. Yeah.
So what difference does it make to you to breathe or not breathe?
Well, it makes a big difference because I have to pause. Strange, I have to pause to think about it. It definitely helps me become grounded and it pushes away anxiety and stress. Like it just gets, otherwise it gets like really tight in the middle of my, this is the Satsuma, right? The central column, right? Yeah, like literally there's a knot that forms about 3/4 of the way down my spine, pretty much
So
for
when
the,
you don't breathe, what you're saying is you're not moving the energy and it gets stuck.
Mhm, mhm.
And then when it gets stuck, what happens to you?
I curl up in a ball and stop participating. Yeah. Hmm. That's interesting.
Very often in cosmic guidance, I say, breathe as though the divine breathes you.
Hmm.
And that came from work I did with the Buteyko breathing method and Patrick McCune. And the Buteyko method helps brittle asthmatics. And Patrick was a very serious asthmatic as a child. And the Buteyko method, it was a Russian scientist who developed the technique. But as you learn to breathe and to breathe properly, we need much less air than we think we need. And so when I was practicing the Buteyko and studying with Patrick, I realized that we actually need so little air that we take in that I began to feel as though I wasn't even breathing, as though the air was coming in from all over and just coming into me through my skin, not even as much through the nose or the mouth. And of course, you always want to breathe in through the nose. In Tai Chi Gong, we breathe out through the mouth. In Buteyko breathing, you breathe in and out through the nose and never breathe through the mouth.
Mhm.
So, and for people who have allergies and asthma, Patrick always recommended taping the mouth shut at night. Because if you mouth breathe, it does very bad things to the jaw, the teeth, and it doesn't give you the proper oxygenation.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of knowledge that goes into breathing
Mhm.
that we don't even usually think about. And it taught me that we need so much less air and we can hold our breath for a lot longer than we think. And practicing that and learning how to do that can be very helpful for people and their health.
Mhm.
But it taught me that because we really don't need huge amounts of air, that if I just think that the divine is always breathing me, there's a level of relaxation
Mhm.
because I'm no longer the doer.
Interesting. Yeah, I remember 2 years ago being up island with some friends for it was basically like a bit of a vision quest. Like spent a couple hours in the forest way up north on the island where there's no humans, which was a whole experience. We also did mushrooms one night as a ceremony. And a bunch of us ended up commenting after that we were all holding our breath. And the
Mm,
one guy facilitating it noticed that and said we were holding our breath for what appeared to be as long as 3 minutes. And I
well,
found myself like testing that and realizing that the body was totally fine, right? And so it was like extreme relaxation. And I got to such depths of, I kind of do my somatic trauma digging in that state. I found there was no problems and it was very relaxing. So it's a good reminder. It seems absurd to me that I have to remind myself to breathe. That's what I've been like struggling with all week.
well, the truth is, Sean, you don't have to remind yourself to breathe.
Mhm.
Whether you are conscious of breathing or not, you've never passed out from a lack of breathing.
No,
So it's not true that you're not breathing.
it's interesting you said that though, because I just flashed back to grade 8, grade 7, and having to do a presentation. Um, and I think I was going to talk about racquetball. Like I was just like I needed a topic, and it was something I liked playing. And I recall feeling like like I was going to pass out. Like it was just such a scary moment that I just never did anything in public again that involved standing in front of people, right? Like, and I've always said to people, I play the drums because I feel like I can hide behind them, right? It's only my head peeking out. So, and so that's like an old story that stuck with me as well. I'm sure I didn't pass out because there's no stories afterwards of people picking me up off the floor. It was just more in my head. It was a scary moment, and
And it
I
still
locked it
is.
in. Hmm. Hmm. So you were talking about introvert, extrovert earlier too, and I noticed Wendy will refer to herself as the introvert, and I'm the extrovert, and so I get the extrovert tasks.
Um,
Um,
the term introvert and extrovert is often misused. In Jungian analytic theory, an introvert is someone whose energy comes from within. And you're moving the energy out.
mhm.
In other words, you have the energy. An extrovert is taking energy from outside and bringing it in.
Hmm.
It has to do with the flow of energy, not whether you're outgoing or not.
Yeah,
And
I
it's
definitely
been
understood it.
misunderstood.
Yeah, no, I used to have that understanding, and then I realized like introversion is you need to go reset your battery. Like that's I've had too much. But even as we're talking about that, it's interesting. It got me thinking like, have you ever looked at generators being the introverts and projectors as the extroverts based on defines sacral or not? Is there a correlation there?
No,
No? Okay.
not that I've seen.
Hmm.
That's the kind of thing in the body map that doesn't hold up.
Hmm.
You can't make a statement like that because the factors don't necessarily correlate.
Mhm.
Uh, I did not find any of the characteristics that Ra described being able to be predicted.
Interesting. It reminds me, I met before the conference. Why am I blanking on his name though? Oh, feel terrible. Anyways, he was the only projector in all like in the composite. And it's interesting how we stumbled across each other, but I think I need to reach out to him and just have a conversation. There's some interesting data to be found there. So
When you can remember his name.
yeah, it'll be easy to find. I know where to find him.
Good.
Um, fascinating. Yeah, I'm just moving stuff through my back. Like I'm actually standing up today. I'm standing on my grounding mat because I'm finding like I am like the energy does get stuck. It's
Mhm.
stuck like in a knot in my back, and I have to get rid of it. So it's been interesting. I'm week 2 into Orion's class, which is like Tai Chi Gung, but it's very element based, and it's a lot more vigorous movement. So it's been very, very interesting. Like I'm high as a kite after it, like without
Mm.
any assistance. It's just like really opens my back up. I actually feel like that Satsuma is squeezed. Like it's like there's a snake coiled around it. Well, maybe that's not the right word, but it's cut off. And a lot of it does seem to be that pelvic floor. Like I have to actually lift it up, and then all of a sudden the air can flow a bit. But then there's just this, I'm using my hands, but you notice you can't see them. There's just this like tube, or there's something squeezing that satsuma from the outside in. So I don't know if that's just clues, like that's other people's
And
energy.
what if you visualized it opening up?
Mhm.
Maybe it's that simple, Sean.
That invocation helps with that for sure. Partly because it's pausing, it's actually saying, I breathe in through my heart. Um, and then I kind of imagine and physically adjust my body. So like I'll let my shoulders each time just I just push them out a bit more. Like I remind myself that there's only so far I can go. So I'm almost like practically advancing it with
You
each.
work so hard, Sean. You really work so hard. And I think it's not so hard. I think you're thinking that you need to be fixed. And I don't think there's anything wrong with you that needs to be fixed. So, what if you changed your mindset and made an assumption that you're perfect the way you are? And that you know what to do when in the moment when you get the intuition to do it.
Mhm. I'm getting there. Mhm.
What will it take to be there?
Well, this helps. I'm even just letting you finish talking because I could feel myself wanting to say but, or, so I just let it go through me. I let it sink in. So thank you. Yeah.
Also, it's wise to do some mirror meditations.
Mirror meditations? What's that?
Look at yourself in the mirror.
Ugh.
See who you are.
Yeah. It's interesting to say that because I don't like looking in the mirror,
Mm.
but I force myself to have some conversations there. And it's always just uncomfortable. Or I'm sorry, it used to be. I don't think it is now. But yeah, that's interesting too. Hmm. So just basically like do a meditate, like listen, do a guided meditation, listen to a meditation, or just relax looking into the mirror.
Be, no, look into a mirror
Mm.
and look in your eyes and see who's there. I did it the other night. I do mirror meditations fairly often. And when I looked the other night, my frequency was different. And I saw things I hadn't seen before. Very interesting.
So what do you mean? Because you see auras, right? But I think you described it as you choose when to and when not to because it's distracting.
Right.
So I mean, I guess the first question is how do you even turn that on or off? And And what does it look like when you saw what was different in the mirror?
My frequency was different. My vibration was different. And some of um, there was a different level of clarity and openness and flow of energy that was different.
Mhm.
I'm not judging it. I'm just saying it was different. It was not the me I usually see.
Hmm. Okay, well, that's interesting. I've had that occurrence a few times this week, now that I think of it, where I was looking at myself in the mirror, had music playing, and was actually just having a little dance to myself, which is not something I would normally allow myself to do. And I was having like a giggle because I could see a smile on my face. And it was like I was projecting something different outwardly. And it felt good. And yeah, I need to do that again. Hmm. Let's see if there's any questions. Oh, a gram. Of course, that's the was. I got a question for you. Hello, Dr. E. Do the
Who's this
humans
from?
mundane mystic,
Okay.
which I forget whose handle that is, but I know that name. Hello, Dr. E. Do the human design environment or perspective slash motivation hold up in your research? I have a follow-up for that.
So the question is, does human design hold up?
No, perspective and motivation. So I think that, and I don't fully understand where that comes from, but I think that is coming from the tone and color and base information, at which
And
point,
it doesn't hold up at all.
particularly because we don't even have we don't have time to within.
You don't have the time. And even if we had the time, it is not a variable that has any factors in common. So it is noise, statistical noise.
So I think from that same information, I have what's known as taste cognition. And I've learned a few things from that that I feel like I can back up, or at least has been experienced.
Everybody could back it up.
Mm,
It's, they're concepts that are universal concepts.
right?
So, look, we have every single gate, every single channel, every single tone, color, and base, if you want to go down and talk about every nuance of physiologic variable that we could have as a human being.
Hmm.
We are whole human beings, or we
Hmm.
would not be in a body growing and thriving and having all the physical markers and the psychological markers. I mean, most people grow up and they're pretty healthy.
Hmm.
So to say we're missing something or we're incapable of something is bullshit.
Yeah, I don't know that it's.
We have all colors, all tones, all bases,
Mhm.
all amino acids, all gates, all channels, all factors, all everything. What gets a little bit stronger in us, a little bit weaker in us, it doesn't mean it's not there.
Yeah. No, you and I last week talked about nuance, right? So let's approach it this way with the word nuance. So
Mhm.
according to my neutrino design app, it says that my cognition is taste cognition. And
I have no
so,
idea what that means.
well, I'll tell you what it meant for me and how it helps, but maybe you can tell me from the body graph, like, did I invent a story or not? So taste cognition, Leanne Wolf said something in a consult with me where she said, why don't you try tasting people's words? And that ended up being a huge eye opener for me because I started looking into, well, what would what are the different tastes? I didn't even know, right? There was sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and then umami, which means beefy. But now I had data to work with. So then I started listening to people's words and I could literally hear, and I'm assuming that's gate 57, and that right ear is picking up on that nuance, but it gave me real data on what interactions with people, because I could taste through my ears their words, and it gave me clues, and then I would ask questions and then things would unfold. So that was an interesting part of what that brought up for me. The other part, and you mentioned mouth taping earlier. So I think it was in a chat with Jonah Dempsey, and he was talking about Kenyan runners and how they would. No, he suggested mouth taping. It was through a book called Breathe or Breath, where it was talking about Kenyan runners would run with water in their mouths, and that's how they became such great long distance runners, is they were only breathing through their nose. It was a very clever way to do that, right? But the book was mostly proposing that humans would do better by taping their mouths at night. There's a bunch of reasons. You're breathing through your nose, which I'm assuming probably helps with anxiety, and a bunch of reasons why I would say that. But you're also not eroding your teeth by having your mouth being open and breathing in air, like water hitting rocks on the shore. But for me, where it went a little further was when I mouth tape, and I don't do it very often, I sleep better.
Mhm.
And I think it may be because, and again, I tied it to that taste cognition, is that I can taste the air with my mouth. And quite literally, like a dog walks in and farts, and all of a sudden my rest is disrupted, right? And so when I've experimented with that, it's been very interesting. But I mean, I suppose that everything I've just said could be applied to anyone, anywhere. Maybe
Mhm.
it's just been more effective for me because of
Because you want it to
that
be.
awareness. I'm sorry, say that again.
You want it to be.
Oh, so I was looking, yeah, coming back to your comment earlier, like I'm trying to fix something that doesn't need to be fixed.
The Buteyko method of breathing says tape the mouth
Mhm.
because it's healthier to breathe just through the nose, and you get the amount of air, and you learn that you don't need as much air as you thought you needed. But, you know, look, Ra asked me to do the science. I did the science. I found things that worked. The body graph is valid. The content of what Ra said about the body graph is not so valid. Um, I discarded, in terms of my investigation and my interpretation, those things that scientifically are erroneous. I don't use them.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that they can be damaging to people. What Ross said about health
Mhm.
was completely inaccurate across the board. So many things that did not hold up scientifically. And what he said about pentas doesn't hold up psychologically,
Mhm.
clinically, from a business standpoint.
Mhm.
And Ra himself said he colors, tones, and bases were useless because we didn't have birth data.
Mhm.
So, based on what are you thinking that you have this taste thing? It's faulty data.
Mhm.
So maybe everybody could imagine hearing taste or hearing smell. And yes, everything has a frequency. We can imagine anything,
Mhm.
but it doesn't mean that if we tested it and if we, you know, did a study, that it would hold up.
Mhm.
And I'm a scientist, so I know nothing about color, tone, and base. When I looked at the body graph chart yesterday in order to use it as an example in my lecture on astrology, there was some numbers, and I said to the programmer, "What are these numbers?" He said, "Oh, it's color, tone, and base." I said, "Get rid of them. I don't want them on my chart. They're meaningless." They will disempower people. So, sorry, I don't use them.
Yeah, no, so, and I appreciate all that, and I agree with you. Um, if we had more accurate birth time, if it was to the second, is it something that would be worth retesting against? And the reality, I say that saying there's not many adults that know their birth time to seconds, right? But like children born today could be standing over them with a stopwatch and, get
And
closer.
then which moment do you pick?
Well, actually, and I've asked you this,
Is it going to be reliable?
yeah, well, that's
You know,
true.
I know with my birth data, I rectified my chart, or I should say, Catherine de Jersey rectified my chart because it wasn't working. And sometimes a person's birth date data is off,
Mhm.
and you have to actually rectify the chart. But I don't really have an interest in going back and looking at all that science.
Mhm.
Why? Because with the integrated chart, 99% of the population are manifesting generators.
Mhm.
And in my view, people know who they are. I'm much more interested in hearing from you who you think you are with no input than to have somebody tell you who you are and then have you think that that is who you are.
Mhm.
It's a little bit backwards.
Mhm. No, but I appreciate, because I don't know that I could tell you who I think I am still. I take in so much information that it's hard. Like I almost think I need to
Well,
go,
so
well, I'm working on that. And I'm noticing more and more that I'm doing it. Like quite, so I have to tell you this because it's the simplest little thing. And it seems to be that I'm always influenced by some movie or something. But, I said to you earlier that like you and the Wizard of Oz have brought, or you've brought up the Wizard of Oz a couple times, and it's come up, and it's like okay, universe, I get it. I need to pay attention. And yesterday it was like all your plans are stopped. Go home, and then Wendy suggested watching it. Now, as I planted the seed, said, I'm sure I said like Eleanor said I should watch this sometime. Do you want to watch it with me? Well, she brought it up. I'm like, ah, fuck's sakes, I guess we're watching the Wizard of Oz, right? It was just that kind of moment. Um, oh, there was a reason why I was telling you that. Oh, yes. So uh, they remade the Willy Wonka movie, which by the way is a fun ride. And it came out like last year. And there's a scene in it where Hugh Grant plays this Oompa Loompa and he's trying to have a nap. And Willy Wonka has got an idea. And he's like, oh. And he pulls his night mask off and he's like, oh, you said oh. And he's like, oh, nothing. He's like, oh. So he goes back to sleep. And then he's like, oh. And so he pulls the mask off and he's like, you said oh twice. So it must mean something. And I have to do that quite literally, even on the pickleball court. Like I will be playing and I'll hear an argument on the court next to me, and I can hear it escalating, and I can tell who's upset and why. I can feel it, I can sense it. And I had to remind myself, like, okay, just let it play out a bit longer. Because otherwise, I'm now in that conversation. So
Mhm.
I'm trying to play pickleball. My partner's aggravated because clearly I'm not totally focused. The other people that used to be my partners are coming at me because they're no longer my allies. They're now the enemy and they're firing at me. Meanwhile, my focus is on another pickleball court and whether this poor woman is going to get her serve back. And so it's insane to me, but it's like I feel like a broken computer at times where I have to be like, dude, it's not yours to fix. Like they'll ask for your help. And you mentioned, I think by text this week, like I give my energy away, but I'm
Mhm.
I'm doing it without intentionally doing it, and I'm certainly not wanting all that. It's just I'm so tuned into it. Um,
And that's where you have to learn to not tune into it.
mhm.
You asked me, how do I turn seeing an aura on or off? I don't look.
Hmm. I think I hear auras, maybe that's maybe that's what's going on for me.
Well, I
Very
hear
acoustic for
I
me.
hear frequency, but choose what you pay attention to.
Mhm. Yeah, I'll let that sit for a bit. I think I likened it to before, like the visual is I've always tried to be Superman, and Superman always flies in and rescues everyone, even if he's not invited. And I read or saw somewhere like Superman as a character has become so ridiculous that he's an unbelievable figure because Superman's been able to fly around the earth in reverse and reverse time and bring people back from dead, and it's just like these unobtainable skills. But
Maybe.
yeah, yeah. Mhm. But then there's Batman. Batman's just, he's got his mannerisms during the day, and at night he waits for the bat signal. If the bat signal shows, he shows up with all his gadgets and stuff that he's invented. So I always try to be a little more like Batman. Mhm.
Just being like Sean.
Yeah, yeah. Cool. My
Any
back
other
on
questions?
fire. So Monday Mystic says mirror meditation sounds very uncomfortable. Self-criticism gets too loud. And I would agree with that. That's how it's felt for me, but I will say it's been very valuable. So it's the
Look
obstacle's the
for
path.
look for the love, look for the joy, look for God within yourself, and see who else is in the mirror with you.
What do you mean by that?
Sometimes there are beings around you.
Hmm. I'll keep an eye out. Um, Monday Mystic says I can relate very deeply with so it's caves environment. I used to jokingly say for years that I want to move to a cave long before human design. So this environment thing is another, here I come again. So, and I know it's making you crazy, but just again, we'll just speak from experiences so that you can help guide. I, yeah, when I sit down with someone, and especially prior to meeting you, but it's still part of my list of parlor tricks. If someone is caves, I will ask them to choose where they want to sit. And or if they're already sitting, I'll ask them why they chose the seat they're in. So here at Funky Town, we've got a bunch of chairs and there's an exit door behind one of the chairs. And sure as shitting, everyone with caves is sitting where they can see the exits. Uh,
Everyone with what?
what's known as a caves environment
Hmm.
is facing the exits.
Hmm.
And this one fellow, I met him at a bar and I said, "Can you pick the spot?" And so he did. And I said, like, "Why'd you pick this location?" He said, "Oh, it's close to the bathroom." I was like, "Is it because you can see both exits from where you're sitting and your back is protected?" And he kind of went like ghost white. Like he was like, and he was like, "Yeah, that's actually exactly right." But it hadn't occurred to him. The way I took the caves environment thing was it was almost like something in genetic history, something in our DNA that remembers thinking from a previous incarnation or life, like next time I'm going to make sure that I'm in the cave and there's I can see the exit, right? You were taken down by a lion last time or something, and the body remembers. So there's this idea or notion that someone will feel more comfortable with that. So I do find when I talk to people about caves, we talk about comforting a child with caves and being like, spoon them from behind. So I've tried that with a couple of mom friends. And there was one friend whose kid was feeling pretty down and sick. And she went and spooned him, and he just kind of it was the only thing that soothed him, and he seemed to recover a bit. Now, I don't know how magical that truly was, but it was like a bit of data that helped in a situation.
Mhm.
Now, I like spoons being spooned too, so but I don't necessarily care which direction it comes from, like whether I'm the spoon or being spooned. Yeah, I guess this environment thing is interesting too. Like, because when I think about even pushing that penta thing aside, but imagine like office feng shui. Like, people are having a meeting and it's not going well. Strategically, placing people's bodies where they're comfortable so that they're as comfortable as they can be to have that meeting. So a caves person, make sure they can see the exit, like let them sit in a chair where they're comfortable. And the reason I need to go down this path a bit more, because there was a fellow that was working for me about 10 years ago. Very good consultant, very highly technical, but very, I guess at the time I would have referred to him as introverted, but he just kept to himself. He wanted to do his work by himself. And in our office environment, it was a very open concept. But he had this desk that was sort of far away from everyone else. It was a little bit darker in that area, less lighting, and nobody could see what he was doing. So, and I remember old me thinking, I'm not sure if I can trust this person because he's always obscuring what he's doing. So, and I'm sure that wasn't the case. He was just more comfortable there. But so I asked my colleague to move his desk to a new location. And the location was he had his back to a kitchen and people were walking by him constantly.
Mm.
Within about 6 hours, he was like rocking back and forth in his chair. And the next day he quit. Um, all because I moved his desk. I remember thinking at the time, well, there you go. I'm right. He must have not been doing any work. You know what I mean? Like my brain went to that when he was just really, really physically uncomfortable. And so I look back at that and feel bad with that situation. Because that wasn't my intent. I wasn't to break
He
him.
could have talked to you about it.
He could have, and he didn't. Yeah. But when I think about this caves environment, like I wonder if he was physically uncomfortable and if that's data that could help him. Uh,
The feng shui of a room is important. And everybody's comfort level is unique. And how bothered people are by their environment varies greatly.
mm,
Um, my guess is that that man probably was super sensitive
mm,
and probably didn't want to feel other people's energy. He
mhm.
could have been picking up on people's energy.
He was a very intense fellow. I always sort of thought he'd be the kind of guy that he'd be up on a clock tower. You know what I mean? Like he was very angry in his outside world as well. So there was all sorts of things going on for him. Um, but it's an interesting exploration, just thinking through that. And so he didn't know how to speak up for what he needed, I guess, at the time.
Or maybe he didn't have courage.
Yeah. Or possibly his protest to move didn't make sense to me, and so I didn't listen.
Or there was no reason to change his position.
Yeah, I mean, funny at the time, I don't think he was underperforming or there was no actual problem. It was the perception of he's not engaging with the rest of the team, because we had it was a good office vibe. Like people enjoyed coming to work and we were doing important things and solving problems. It was
Well, but some people who do best when they work by themselves
Mhm,
don't do well when other people's auras are intruding on them. When I was in graduate school, I had my desk in the stacks. So the department I was in had its own building, University of Chicago, And it was called Human Development.
And sorry,
Uh,
stacks, are those giant, big, like
well,
big books with
it was a
posters?
library.
Yeah,
The department had its own library,
okay.
and the desk was on the main reading level. And then you'd go up steps, and there were all these books and specific things. And we didn't have computers the way we do now. So many of the articles or the things I needed to read, I'd have to borrow from the library and read it at the library. You couldn't take it out of the library. So you could have it for a few hours because there weren't that many copies. And so as a graduate student, you'd get a desk. And my desk was on the second floor in the stacks among all the books. And there was nobody there, just me.
Mhm.
And I loved it. I would sit at my little desk, sort of like what you described for this guy. Nobody came. It was silent. There weren't people moving in and out. There weren't people talking where you'd have to say, shh, shh, we're in a library. Um, and then later on, um, once I was way beyond that level of studies, um, I would go to the big library, Regenstein, whole block of, building, and it was beautiful. And I would go up into the stacks of books, and I would sit at a desk at the stacks. Why? Because I felt like the knowledge of those books was just osmosing into me.
Mm.
It was almost, and I still, I have so many books. You saw my library on the third floor of my home. And
Mhm.
then my bookcase in my office is so full, I have things up in my hanging cabinet. Um, but sometimes it's just holding a book and feeling the energy of it.
Mhm. You mentioned that before, or it was you or someone had suggested like possibly you could absorb a book just by putting your hand on it. And there's something lovely and energetic about that. My mind has difficulty imagining I could absorb the book, but I appreciate you saying I could absorb the energy of the book or the intention of the book. That's a whole different thing. When
Well,
you
but
sent the
my point is that we each need different environments at different times. I tend to be an extrovert, not an introvert, surprisingly enough. Um, Marvin's an introvert. And meeting us, you might think the opposite.
Mhm.
Um, but it has to do with where you take your energy from in order to process it. I'm taking things constantly from outside and then moving it around inside of me and coming to some inner understanding. Whereas Marvin takes things from inside him and then understands and looks for it outside. It's a different flow of where you get your energy and how you use it.
Mhm.
It doesn't have to do with type.
Mm. What does it have to do with? Is it to do with the
Genetics,
in,
perception.
right?
Uh, I think it's innate. I think it's genetic.
Mm.
You
Hmm.
have kids.
I
Didn't
do.
you know who they were when they were first born?
That's a good question. I don't think I fully know who they are now. So
Get to know them.
yeah, I try. I try. Hmm.
Well, you try, but that doesn't mean you do.
They have to meet me halfway. I try to connect. They're busy.
Um, have you told them that you want to meet with them halfway?
Mhm.
They're not interested?
Typically, no.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Even if they knew it meant a lot to you.
Mhm. I'd voice that. I could voice it again. I probably should.
I wouldn't let them get away with that.
Hmm.
They're your kids.
Hmm.
You have a right to know who they are.
Hmm.
So find the ground that they will meet you on.
Yeah. Yeah, as you say that, I'm recognize that I'm strategically making grounds there, but I have to be strategic. There's something of when I come on too strong, it seems in the past, and I've tuned people tune me out, especially those closest to me. So they're still getting used to what's evolved. So it's a gradual process, but it's worth putting in the time.
Do you play any other instruments beside the drums?
No,
Have you ever considered it?
I have. Yeah, I've tried a few things, but it was at a different time. I might be, why do you ask?
Because drums are a strong energy. And I'm wondering if you have approached your kids like a drummer instead of like a different instrument.
Hmm. I mean, it's an interesting question entirely. Part of me is like, oh, I've tried guitar bass before, never stuck with it, but that was a different time with a different energy. So it's an old story. Um, Also, to be a more complete drummer, I probably should know these other instruments better so that I'm more in tune with them. So,
Only if you want to.
yeah, no, I can kind of feel an interest percolating there. So I might explore that.
Do your
Hmm.
kids play an instrument?
Yeah, my son plays bass guitar. And he's very good. He's very excited about a new group of people he's looking to create a band with. My daughter played a bit of guitar, but that hasn't really been something that interests her. So,
So, can you relate to your son over the music? Can you jam with him?
uh, we've talked about it. There is definitely, so it's funny, we had a conversation just yesterday, and he was talking about the dynamics of this new band, and he was putting a lot of pressure on it. He was like, they're having trouble just even coordinating when to meet and jam. And but he's talking about, well, you're not fully established yet, and like some of these sort of like this band has already succeeded in his mind. And so I could remember those feelings when I was in things before, and I would get so excited that I was just like I generally scared the people around me because like, well, here we go, we're on the Sean train. So um so I was able to kind of like deconstruct that form and come back to like just relax and enjoy. Like, do you like playing with these people? And I got talking about the bands that have had lasting power or last staying is that they actually liked each other. So for example, in Canada, there was a band called the Tragically Hip, and they were well known in Canada, not very big in the States. But their lead singer died of a brain tumor about 5 years ago. It was very sad. They did like a farewell tour and it was very emotional. But the band is stuck together now. They run a marijuana growth thing and they made their own beer and like they're just still friends, right? And it was like that doesn't actually happen with bands very often. But they just had staying power. And it seemed to be that they had a solid energy between them. That'd be actually something that'd be a very interesting conversation sometime, is I would love to revisit the Beatles with you sometime. Because I did look at it from that Penta perspective before, and I was trying to like, how is it that these four guys were so successful? And then it all fizzled out. And I had correlated the timing to when their manager died, the energy of that unit died with it. And that last movie that came out about them by the guy that it was basically a documentary from when they broke up. And it really was the time of when I think the manager had died. And so they were literally, the band was just falling apart energetically. They were fighting. They didn't, obviously, this guy had more impact than people realized, right? So it'd be interesting to look at that time frame and their designs and see if that's actually kind of true. Because I couldn't even watch the whole documentary.
You would not see it in the design, you would see it in the astrology.
Or, so in the astrology, yeah. Yeah. Oh my God, my back is just, I'll be working on this all day. How are you doing for energy? We've already clocked in at almost an hour and a half here already. Good
You
to keep
know,
going?
my energy is my energy, you know.
Okay, do you have any appointments in the next 20 minutes?
No, I don't. I have my next appointment, I think, is at 4 o'clock.
Okay. Well, why don't we keep going? I'll see if there's some question here.
Are there any comments?
There is. I'm just Raven I have a question for Dr. Allen regarding the integrated world chart. Is the integrated world chart is who we are?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, there you go. Short answer, yes. So we'll tell you what, why? Even though I agree with you, why is it?
When we're born, we are an infant. We're a baby. We have many systems that have not fully developed. We know now that the gut is very significant.
Mhm.
It's like a second brain. And we know that a baby in the first 3 months of life has an undeveloped gut. That's why many babies have colic.
What do you mean by undeveloped? Like it hasn't stretched out?
Matured.
Yeah.
No, it's not fully functioning.
Mm.
It's not developed fully. It needs to be, remember, in utero, the baby doesn't eat.
Mm.
The baby takes nourishment through the umbilical cord. So when the baby's born, it's a whole new world for it. It's breathing, it's swallowing, it has to eat to survive. The baby has never experienced temperature changes, hunger. It's never experienced the body functions of being in a physical body in the world. So when a baby is born, it's a major trauma. You know, it's this innocent little, I mean, I remember seeing Marvin and I the night before I left India, stayed at the Taj Mahal Hotel in Mumbai. And I remember having dinner. It was a very nice restaurant, and it was like a balcony. And there was a woman with a newborn baby. And I remember looking at that baby and turning away and saying to Marvin, I can't look. That baby is in so much pain from being born. This baby did not like coming into the world.
Mm.
And it was physically painful for me to see this baby's consciousness and its inability to express itself. And think about the first 3 months of life. In the first hour and a half, the baby has to breathe on its own for the first time ever. Then it gets cleaned up and handled, which has never been handled before.
Mhm.
And in 2 days, the milk comes down, and now there's an attachment that happens. So the baby has a need. In utero, it never experienced need or discomfort or any of that. So the first 3 months of life, the pediatric literature says it's the missing fourth trimester. And what's really developing is the gut, the
Mhm.
whole gastrointestinal system. Uh, Eating, peeing, pooping, crying, figuring out how to be in the world. The first week, the spirit enters. That's why in many cultures, there is a ceremony at a week. But then it's about the gut maturing. We know now that many psychological disturbances come out of the gut. And if you give people pre or probiotics that are appropriate for them, they heal and their moods get better and their anxiety disappears. So, in my work, and not intentionally, but when I looked for the calculations of the mammal's sleep design, I ended up with critical periods in human development. And those critical periods mark the development of the cortex connecting up with the brain. So when a baby is 3 months old and can exercise volition or choice, what kinds of choices is it making?
Mhm.
It's going to make some choices about what's right for it. It cries when it's hungry. Might cry when it's uncomfortable. And then the adults have to figure it out because the baby can't talk.
Mhm.
So, depending on who you are, is going to depend on how you communicate. The nonverbal, unconscious needs.
Mhm.
And the importance of the gut and how it's developing follows us. So, getting your gut in order is pretty important, even as an adult, to eat
Mhm.
the right foods, to have the right pre and probiotics, to make sure that you are taking care of your body. And it's with what you take into it,
Mhm.
as well as the environment around you.
2 days is when the breast milk is flowing, right? That's
Mhm.
the marker there. How important is breastfeeding to turning on that gut?
Not at all.
No? So it's more like it's still a function of the baby to
No,
learn.
it's a function of the mother for her hormones to release, and she feels an attachment to her baby.
Mm.
You don't need, I mean, the hormones are released whether or not you breastfeed. How long you breastfeed is another issue because
Right.
then you're, when a woman breastfeeds, she's connected to the baby.
Mhm.
And, if the baby, I mean, I remember when I had my kids and I was breastfeeding, and, if I went more than 2 or 3 hours, I knew my baby was hungry.
Mm,
You know, it's like a continuation of the pregnancy
mhm,
when you're breastfeeding. But you don't need to be doing that to feel the connection with your baby.
mhm. Hmm. So many things, so many questions. Um, but that'll take us down a whole different path.
Other questions?
Mundane Mystic says, thank you for always getting back to my questions. Been enjoying watching you guys for months now. Well, and Raven says, thank you so much because I love this chart. Good. So she loves her integrated chart. I think that's it for questions at the moment. Do I have any questions?
Anything else you want to cover?
I'm feeling pretty full. I need to go sit
We can
down.
stop anytime.
Yeah.
I have a lot of work to do.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that seems like a
Let me say that for any of the people watching, I am considering opening classes up if people are interested in attending any of the ongoing classes. And I am thinking of how to do it so people do not need to attend the classes, but it could be more of a self-study.
okay. And if someone joined the class, because we're what, 4 weeks in, your expectation is they
We're
would,
2 months in. This is the third month.
we're in the third month already? Okay. Okay.
We
Yes, that's
started September.
right.
So we have September, October, and now we're in November. So if somebody wanted to be in the class, they would need to catch up.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna go breathe for a bit. Thank you. I hope you have a great weekend.
You too. Do you want to take a few minutes after this and go over what we talked about earlier?
Sure. I'd like
Okay.
that. Okay. Well, we'll say goodbye to the internet here.